My name is Chloe Harper. I'm 33 years old, and on Christmas Eve, my own sister called me a loser and shut the door in my face. The night air cut through my coat like broken glass. I was standing on the porch of my parents' house, clutching two oversized gift bags so heavy my wrists ached. Inside were sweaters I'd picked out weeks ago, toys I knew her kids had begged for, books Mom used to love before her eyesight dimmed. Every corner of those bags carried a piece of me. And yet Amanda didn't even glance at them. She just leaned against the doorframe. Arms folded tight, lips curved into that cold little smile that always meant she'd won. "Christmas isn't a place for losers," she said, her voice low enough that only I heard. Mom stood behind her, eyes flickering like a candle about to burn out. Dad clattered pans in the kitchen, pretending not to notice. Not one of them asked me to step inside. I swallowed hard, my breath turning white in the air. For a second, I thought about forcing my way past her, setting the gifts under the tree, daring them to look me in the eye, but my body wouldn't move. My fingers tightened on the handles until the paper tore. So I nodded once. Fine. My voice was steady, even as my jaw locked. Then I turned and walked back into the night boots crunching on ice. They thought they'd shut me out for good. They thought calling me a loser would keep me small, quiet, harmless. But what they didn't know was that I had already stopped being their wallet, and that was when everything truly began. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because this story, my story, isn't just about a slammed door on Christmas Eve. It's about years of giving until my hands were empty, years of being told I wasn't enough even when I gave everything I had. Maybe you've lived through something like that too. The silence after a fight, the way a parent looks away instead of standing up for you, the sting of realizing love came with a price tag. If any of that sounds familiar, stay with me. What happened after that night still burns in my chest, and it changes everything. I didn't start out as the family's safety net. That role crept up on me quiet as mildew spreading under wallpaper, barely visible until the whole wall felt soft to the touch. Back then, I thought I was just helping. One small favor, one desperate phone call at a time. The first time Amanda asked for money, it was late. I remember because the second hand of my kitchen clock glowed faint green in the dark, ticking toward midnight while I sat at my table with cold coffee. My phone lit up, her name flashing. "Chloe, I don't know what to do." Her voice cracked like glass under strain. "They're going to lock us out tomorrow. We're already 2 months behind on rent." "The kids, where will they sleep?" I pressed the heel of my hand into my temple. My apartment was tiny walls sweating steam heat that smelled like rust. I had $40 in my checking account until payday. But Amanda wasn't talking about groceries. She was talking about losing her roof. I told myself it was temporary, just a bridge to something better. So I wired the money. $1,000 I didn't really have. My rent went late, and I ate ramen for 3 weeks. But the relief in her sob when she texted we're safe felt worth it. What I didn't know then was that I had just signed the first page of a contract I'd never agreed to. The second ask came months later when their old Chevy died on the side of Route 9. Amanda called me from the shoulder kids crying in the back seat, Ethan cursing at the hood like he could will the engine to start. I drove out there in the rain, headlights smeared by the storm. The car stank of oil and wet leather, the kids' backpacks crammed with snacks. Just this once, Amanda promised as I slid my credit card across the greasy counter of the repair shop. "Ethan's got interviews lined up. We'll pay you back." But no envelope ever showed up in my mailbox. No check, no folded bills tucked in a card. Weeks passed, then months. And when I finally asked carefully, softly, Amanda said, "Chloe, you know how tight things are. We'll square it someday. Someday." The word hung in my chest like a stone. I kept telling myself, family helps family. That's what Dad always said, though he never seemed to include himself in the definition. I remembered one Thanksgiving, I was maybe 11, sitting at the end of the table with a chipped plate while Amanda basked in the glow of everyone's praise. She had just been cast as the lead in her high school play, and Mom kept saying, "Our star, our shining girl." Then she glanced at me. "Chloe, sweetie, can you refill the gravy?" That was my role even then, not the star, but the helper. And helpers don't get applause. Years later, nothing had changed. only the price tags had grown larger. When the twins started middle school, they needed laptops. Amanda called me 3 times in one day, her voice pitched between guilt and demand. You know they can't keep up without them. Don't you want them to succeed? You've always believed in education. So I swiped my card again, watched my balance plummet, stood under the fluorescent hum of Best Buy while the cashier boxed up 2 shiny machines that weren't for me. I told myself it was love. That love sometimes looked like receipts and overdraft fees. But deep down, something in me flinched when Amanda stopped saying thank you, when it became assumed, expected, like paying for her kid's future was simply part of my job description. The summer camp was the worst. That year, I was saving every penny for a down payment on a small condo, a place of my own, finally, after years of renting beige apartments with leaky faucets and neighbors who fought through the walls. Then Amanda sighed over the phone. Guess the kids will just sit at home bored all summer. Unless. One word heavy with accusation. I heard the unspoken sentence. Unless you care enough, Chloe. Unless you're not selfish. So I signed another check. The sound of my pen scratching the paper felt like sandpaper against my throat. I mailed it, then sat at my kitchen table staring at the blank spot where my dream of a home used to be. I didn't know it then, but that check bought me more than their summer. It bought Amanda's belief that I would never stop, that I was endless. But even rivers run dry. By the time Ethan pitched me his startup, I should have known better. We were in my parents' living room one Sunday afternoon. The kids sprawled on the carpet, crayons rolling under the coffee table, cartoons buzzing from the TV. Amanda sat perched on the couch, arm like a queen, waiting for her announcement to land. Ethan paced, waving a manila folder full of printouts. It's a sure thing, he said, his tone full of the kind of confidence only people without money can afford. E-commerce dropshipping, huge margins. We just need a little capital to get off the ground. I asked him how much. His eyes flicked to Amanda, then back to me. 10 grand. I laughed, sharp and bitter, before I could stop myself. 10 grand was more than I'd ever had in my savings at one time. You can't be serious. Amanda leaned forward, her nails tapping the armrest. Chloe, don't you trust us? Think of it as an investment. We'll pay you back double once the orders start rolling in. I looked at my parents. Mom fussed with her knitting needles, head down. Dad cleared his throat and muttered something about the game starting soon. Neither of them spoke up for me. Neither of them ever did. I should have walked out right then. But I thought of the kids, their backpacks already fraying the way Amanda had whispered to me after the rent crisis, "You're all we've got." So I wrote the check. My hand shook as the ink bled into the paper. Walking home that night, the air felt heavy. I could still smell Ethan's cologne clinging to my coat, cheap spice and desperation. I told myself again it was temporary, that someday they'd stand on their own feet, but someday never came. Instead, the asks multiplied. Grocery money when Amanda's part-time hours got cut, sports uniforms for the twins, a field trip fund, Ethan's business dinners that he swore were networking opportunities, and every time I hesitated, Amanda's voice sharpened. So you'd let the kids go without. You'd let them be embarrassed at school. She knew exactly where to stab my softest spot. What hurt most wasn't even the money. It was the way their gratitude thinned, evaporated until it was gone. Helping became obligation. Generosity became a leash they tightened around my neck. One night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at my checkbook, the pages thinned and bent from overuse. My reflection in the window looked pale, eyes ringed with exhaustion. I pressed the pen to paper again and again until my wrist cramped until I couldn't remember the last time I'd bought something just for myself. That was the night I realized I had trained them, not the other way around. I had taught Amanda and Ethan that I would never say no, that my wallet was their safety net. I was the invisible scaffolding holding up their shaky house, and they didn't even notice I was there. Still, part of me clung to the hope that it meant they loved me. That if I stopped giving, they would still see me as family. That illusion shattered the Christmas before last. I went all out like always, bought presents for everyone: Amanda, Ethan, Mom, Dad, the kids. I maxed out a credit card just to see their faces light up. And they did for a moment. The living room glowed with torn wrapping paper squeals of excitement, Amanda smiling as if she had orchestrated it all. But I noticed something small. The thank yous came slower, softer. The kids tore into the next box before finishing with the last. Amanda didn't even open hers until late, muttering about being tired. That night, as I drove home under the shimmer of Christmas lights strung across strangers' porches, I felt emptier than I had in years, like I had poured everything out and been left with nothing in return. I promised myself the next Christmas would be different, that I wouldn't stretch past my breaking point just to keep the illusion alive. For the first time, I made lists early. I set a budget. I picked gifts with care, but within reason. I wrapped them weeks ahead of time, neat bows, shiny paper. I stacked them in the corner of my apartment, letting myself feel a flicker of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. I imagined walking up my parents' front steps with those bags, watching the kids' eyes brighten, feeling maybe finally like I belonged. I didn't know it then, but that pile of carefully chosen presents was about to become something else entirely, a weight, a burden, a symbol of every line I had ever failed to draw. And when Amanda stood in that doorway on Christmas Eve, arms folded, lips curling around the word loser, I understood. No matter how much I gave, it would never be enough. I used to think favoritism was just something kids imagined, that maybe I was oversensitive, reading too much into the tilt of my mother's smile the way my father's eyes lingered on Amanda longer than on me. But memory has a cruel way of holding on to the little details, the ones you wish you could sand down until they disappear. Like the winter I turned 11. Snow packed high against the porch rail, the house heavy with the smell of turkey and cinnamon. At dinner, Amanda announced she had been cast as the lead in the spring musical. Everyone cheered. Dad raised his glass to our star. I clapped too, though my hands stung from the dry air and from the way no one looked my direction. My report card, folded carefully in my pocket, never left my lap. Straight A's every subject, but nobody asked. When Mom finally glanced at me, it was only to say Chloe be a dear and refill the gravy. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the old heater hiss. I remember whispering to myself, maybe next year they'll notice me. But next year never came. Amanda was always the dazzling one, the girl who shone. I was the shadow she stood in. That pattern followed me into adulthood. At work, I was the one people relied on. Numbers balanced under my hands, budgets made sense. My boss once told me, "You're the reason this department doesn't sink." At the office, I had weight. I had value. But at home, my worth was measured in what I could give away. A new set of uniforms for the twins. The latest phone Ethan swore was for business. Grocery money slipped across the table like a bribe for affection. I learned to split myself in two. The capable woman in slacks and tidy blouses who managed other people's chaos by day, and the silent helper who swallowed insults by night, pressing down the hurt until it settled in my chest like a stone. I remember one night walking home from the office, December air sharp enough to make my lungs ache. The city was strung with holiday lights, glittering reds and golds, store windows frosted in fake snow. I stopped outside a toy store, watching parents clutch shopping bags, their kids bouncing with excitement. I thought about the gifts stacked in my apartment. I thought about how careful I'd been this year, how deliberate. No more reckless spending. No more overdraft notices slipped under my door. This year I'd struck a balance. The kids would get things they'd love. My parents would have something thoughtful. Even Amanda and Ethan had packages wrapped in neat silver paper. For once, I was proud of what I'd prepared. It felt almost hopeful, like maybe Christmas could be different this time. But there was a part of me, small, insistent, that whispered otherwise. I remembered the Christmas before, how Amanda barely opened her gift, how Mom had looked right through me when I passed her the wrapped shawl I'd chosen, how Dad muttered a distracted thanks before turning back to the TV. Still, I wanted to believe. I spent hours perfecting the bows, smoothing the paper flat, labeling each tag in my careful handwriting. My apartment smelled like tape and pine-scented candle wax. I stacked the bags by the door, a mountain of proof that I belonged, that I was not the loser Amanda sometimes implied. In those quiet nights leading up to Christmas, I kept picturing the scene, walking up the front steps, the door opening wide, the kids squealing, my parents smiling. For once, Amanda wouldn't have anything sharp to say. I didn't know it yet, but that hope was as fragile as the thin glass ornaments I'd hung on my tiny artificial tree. One wrong touch, one careless word, and it would shatter into pieces too small to ever glue back together. And when the moment came, when Amanda folded her arms in that doorway, when Mom looked away and Dad busied himself with the clatter of pans, I realized the truth. I had never been preparing for acceptance. I had been preparing for disappointment, and Christmas was about to deliver it. I didn't sleep much the night before Christmas. The radiator hissed and clicked like a tired animal, and somewhere down the hall, a couple argued in low pulsing waves, their words indistinct, only the rhythm of frustration drifting under my door. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, the plaster patched in uneven squares, the faint shadow of my fake tree cast by the streetlight. The gifts waited by the door, neat and certain in their stillness. My phone face down on the nightstand felt like a weight. I told myself I wouldn't check it. I checked it anyway. No messages from Mom, none from Dad. Nothing from Amanda but the memory of her voice in previous years sharp when she felt me hesitate syrup sweet when she wanted something. My banking app glowed a cool blue. I scrolled through the month paychecks and obligations out. Rent utilities, the spreadsheet I built for myself like a guardrail. This year I'd stuck to it. This year I had drawn a line at least on paper. I watched the numbers a long time, letting their steadiness slow the pitching in my chest. Numbers make sense if you give them context. People don't. I got up and made tea. The kettle screamed in the dark kitchen and then fell silent. I breathed the steam, holding the mug in both hands as if heat could stand in for courage. I took each gift out of its bag and checked the tags again, not because I wasn't sure, but because the ritual soothed me. For Mom, the soft shawl in a warm gray that wouldn't glare against her dimming vision. For Dad, a book of sports stories he could read in short bursts between commercial breaks. For the twins, the things I knew would land the exact Lego set one had circled in a catalog until the paper tore the sketching kit the other had whispered about like a secret. For Amanda, a set of baking tools she'd once insisted she needed to start selling cupcakes on the side, a dream that lasted a week and then evaporated. For Ethan, a sturdy wallet he'd never use because his money lived in whatever hole swallowed it quickest. I told myself a story while I checked the bows. In it, the door opened and my mother smiled the way she used to when I was very small and the world had not yet sorted us into star and helper. In it, Dad put a hand on my shoulder, a silent thanks. In it, Amanda glanced at the bags, bit back the first sharp thing that rose to her tongue, and said something neutral instead. "Merry Christmas. You made it. Come in." In the story, I told myself I set the gifts under the tree, and someone poured me cider, and we sat together while the TV played something we never watched. When the tea cooled to skin temperature, I rinsed the cup and set it upside down in the rack. The apartment had the clean, staged quiet of a place waiting to be left. I pulled on my coat, then took it off, then put it on again. I folded and refolded the scarf. A snowplow ground past on the street below, orange light spinning across my ceiling. I remembered a different orange light, the low lamp in our old living room when I was 11, the blanket of heat from the fireplace, the way Mom had labeled every gift with an elaborate curl to Amanda's name, while mine looked like an afterthought, slanted and quick. I remembered the advice whispered at me across years. "Don't make a scene, Chloe. Be the bigger person, Chloe. You know your sister. You know how she is." Around 2, I sat at the table with a pen and a receipt and did the math again as if redemption might balance like a ledger. Hours I'd worked, overtime I'd taken, grocery trips I'd covered. The line that interested me most was the one I could not assign a number to the cost of being the reliable one. It never shows up in accounts until it does, and then it comes due all at once. I must have dozed because I woke with my cheek against my arm and the room a shade lighter. Dawn pushed up a pale rim behind the buildings. I showered and dressed in jeans and a soft blue sweater, the one that made my eyes look steadier than I felt. I braided my hair so it wouldn't whip in my face if the wind came up. I slipped on boots that could handle ice. I lifted the bags and felt the ache climb into my forearms, a manageable pain, the kind that says you are carrying something real. On the way to my parents' house, the city thinned to quiet streets and porches. Wreaths sagged under the weight of frost. The sky hung low, a lid of pewter. In front of the house, the driveway was a sheet of packed snow pitted by old footprints, and the sharp edges of a shovel left leaning against the railing. I killed the engine and sat letting the heater's fan wind down, listening to the small ticking of the car cooling. My breath drew a circle on the windshield and faded. I could smell their house even before I opened the door to the porch, pine and butter and the faint metallic scent of the radiator pipes that always banged in the morning. I put the bags down and flexed my fingers, pins and needles racing back into them. My heart beat in my throat, not fast, not slow, a steady thud that felt like a knock from the inside. I rehearsed a dozen lines and discarded them all. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't sell my generosity like a pitch deck. I wouldn't explain the way I had explained for years. If they asked what I brought, I would tell them. If they didn't, I would carry the bags back to my car. If Amanda said something sharp, I would let it fall and shatter at my feet instead of catching it and tucking it into my coat like a gift I had to accept. I lifted my hand toward the door. The wood was cold, the paint chipped where the wreath scratched it year after year. Somewhere inside, a pan scraped across a burner. A child's laugh rose and faded. I breathed in once the air cold enough to sting and told myself the oldest, simplest truth I knew. I am not endless. I am not an account to be drafted at will. I am a person. I deserve to walk through a door without being measured. I knocked lightly at first, then harder, the sound traveling through the frame, through the rooms I grew up in. Footsteps. The shadow of a figure behind frosted glass. What I didn't know then was that the door I was about to face would teach me more about who I was than any receipt, any budget, any vow made to an empty room. What I didn't know was that the word waiting on the other side would split something open that had been sealed for years, and that once it broke, there would be no going back. I didn't flinch when the door opened. Amanda filled the frame the way a storm fills the sky, sudden, complete, impossible to ignore. Her sweater was the kind that looks expensive because someone else paid for it. She lifted her chin a fraction. You again. I kept my voice level. I have gifts for the kids. She didn't move. They'll live without whatever you scraped together this year. Behind her, the tree blinked in patient patterns. Mom hovered near the hallway, hands twisted in her apron. Dad clattered a pan loud enough to be heard from space. Why am I not welcome? I asked. What did I do? Amanda's smile went thin. You barely did anything. That's the point. Last year you showed up. This year you acted small. I stared. There are more gifts in my car than anyone else is getting. She shrugged. Last year was more. Try keeping up with yourself. I glanced at Mom, hoping out of habit, not faith, that she would step in. Her eyes slid off mine like rain off glass. Dad turned the faucet on full blast and rinsed nothing. You're embarrassing us, Amanda said. You set a bar and then you crawled under it. The paper handles cut into my fingers. The edges of the bags bit my wrists. I felt each tooth. Say you're sorry, Amanda added softly. Say you'll fix it before dinner. The old reflex rose in me like a hand to my throat. I swallowed it. No. Her eyebrow arched. Excuse me. I set the bags on the porch and stepped back. I'm done proving I belong here. She started to laugh, a small, cold sound. Then, don't come in. I didn't. I turned boots loud on the steps, and the door closed behind me with a click that sounded like a verdict. I drove home with the radio off because my head was already full. The city looked sharpened, each light a pinprick. In my apartment, I set the bags down and stood there, palms tingling. I felt something loosen quietly the way a knot surrenders after years of being pulled tight. Text your mother, I told myself. Ask if she wants her gift. I didn't. I left the phone face down and watched my breath fog the window. Somewhere below, someone dragged a Christmas tree up a stairwell, needles skittering on concrete, the sound of celebration being muscled where it did not fit. The next morning was a long corridor of nothing. No Merry Christmas from Mom. No come by later from Dad. Nothing from Amanda unless you count the photo she posted of the kids unwrapping presents captioned, "Some people know how to show up." I stared at the picture until the pixels swam. The twins grinned at something I didn't buy. On the edge of the frame, a hand wearing Ethan's watch lifted a glass. I set my phone down and made coffee. It tasted burnt like a memory I couldn't swallow. By noon, I had convinced myself this was a one-day injury. By evening, the silence calcified. When I finally slept, it was like dropping through ice into water so dark I couldn't tell which way was up. New Year's Eve came dressed like a party I wasn't invited to. My building hummed with voices, the stutter of laughter in the hall, the ghost of perfume. I poured a small glass of something sparkling and sat on the couch with my knees tucked under me. The TV countdown pulsed in blue light. At midnight, my phone stayed dark. I didn't cry. I don't know why I expected to. Next morning, Mom finally texted, "Hope you're well. Come by next week." She used no emoji, which meant she was careful. I typed and deleted a dozen answers before sending, "Okay." Then Amanda found the opening she wanted. The kids were disappointed, she wrote as if she were reading a weather report. "Couldn't you have done just a little more?" Something in me stood up. I read the message twice and then placed the phone screen down and counted to 30. I answered with one sentence, "I'm not your budget." The typing dots bubbled up, then vanished, then returned. "Wow, you really don't care, do you?" I put the phone in a drawer. 2 days later, there was pounding at my door. Not a knock, a demand. I was stirring pasta, the steam fogging my glasses. I turned off the burner and wiped my hands on a towel. When I opened the door, Amanda brushed past me like she'd been invited. Ethan followed, hands jammed in his pockets, eyes roaming my apartment like he could inventory it. "We need to talk," Amanda said. Her voice had that shaky edge she used when she wanted to sound reasonable and instead sounded like a violin string. "Nice to see you too." She ignored that. "You made your point, Chloe. Very dramatic. But this is ridiculous. The kids barely have what they need. Tom's doing everything he can." I looked at him. "Everything you can," he bristled. "I'm working on something big." I felt an old, exhausted laugh rise and didn't let it out. Amanda leaned forward. "This isn't about him. This is about you. You've always helped before. Now suddenly you're too good for your own family. No, I've decided I'm done being your bank." She blinked, then found her footing. "You think you're punishing me, but you're punishing them." That one landed where she wanted. I held steady. "They're your responsibility." "Tom's responsibility." Ethan shifted, jaw tightening. "We're asking for a little help until things get better." "How many times have I heard that?" I said quietly. "Things don't get better. They get more expensive." Amanda's cheeks flushed. "You've changed." "Maybe. Or maybe I finally noticed." She jabbed a finger at me. "You used to care. You stood on Mom's porch and called me a loser because I didn't spend enough on your kids," I said. "You think that's care?" Her mouth opened closed. For a second, I thought she might cry. Then she took my refusal and polished it into anger. "Fine. Do whatever you want. Just remember who suffers." I didn't answer. She spun toward the door, yanked it open hard enough that it rattled the frame, and left. Ethan followed with a last look that said everything and nothing, resentment, calculation, a little fear. The silence that fell after they left felt different than the kind that had sat with me on Christmas. This one wasn't empty. This one was a room I had locked on purpose. I stood in my kitchen until the pasta went gluey and the pot filled the apartment with the smell of starch. When the kettle started to hiss again, I turned off every burner and leaned on the counter until my palms hurt. Then I walked to my desk, pulled out a notebook, and wrote one line across a clean page. No more transfers. It looked like a budget note because that's my language. But what I wrote was not about money. It was a boundary spelled in ink. The next week, nothing. No calls, no knocks. The apartment settled around me in a peace that felt almost like fear. I woke early, worked, went to the gym, cooked meals I ate while they were hot. I told myself I missed no one. At night, when the pipes groaned, my body told a different story. On Friday, a number I didn't recognize lit my phone. I let it ring out of habit, and then for reasons I can't name, I called back. "Good afternoon." A calm baritone. Is this Chloe Harper who's asking Daniel Ross? I'm an attorney in Back Bay. A client of mine believes you should be aware of certain financial activities related to your family. My throat went dry. Financial activities. He didn't soften it. Transfers you've made to your sister and her husband. How those funds were handled. I'd prefer to discuss in person. Who's your client? A pause long enough to count to 4. Someone who wants you protected. I almost hung up. Then I saw the picture again in my head, the one where Ethan's watch flashed on the edge of a frame, a glass lifted. Send me the address, I said. The next day I sat at my desk and couldn't focus. Spreadsheets swam. Numbers that normally snapped into place refused to assemble. Around noon I grabbed my coat and went outside to walk air back into my lungs. The sky had the flat pewter of New England winter. I passed a deli and the smell of pastrami and brine made me ravenous and nauseous at once. Back at my building, the elevator doors closed on me, and an older woman stuck her hand in to hold them, a simple kindness that startled me so much I almost said thank you too loudly. In my apartment, I stood over the sink with a glass of water and breathed until my heartbeat dropped out of my throat. Open loops have a sound. They hum. The call left one humming in my walls. That night, my mother finally called. I watched the screen a full ring too long before answering. Hi, Mom. Her voice was careful, like she was walking over ice. Your sister says you were unkind. I closed my eyes. She called me a loser on Christmas. A beat. You know how she is. Yes, I said. I know exactly how she is. Well, could you try to not make this bigger than it is? Your father's blood pressure, I let her trail out. I'm taking care of myself, Mom. She sighed the way people do when a dog won't come when called. We're family Chloe. That's what I'm trying to figure out. After we hung up, I turned all the lights off and stood by the window. Across the street, a couple danced in their living room badly to a song I couldn't hear. Their shadows spun like paper cutouts. It felt like watching a world I used to think I might get invited to. Before I went to bed, I picked up my phone and typed Ethan in the search bar. His posts were the usual brag without proof, but one photo stopped me. A dinner check in the corner of a table, a caption full of grind talk, the date stamped the same night I paid for the twins' uniforms. I stared until the numbers blurred a ledger I had been keeping without writing anything down. At work, numbers always told the truth. They balanced or they didn't. Paper trails didn't lie, which is why when I found myself staring at a set of accounts that didn't add up, my chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with my client. It was a mid-sized firm, a nonprofit that claimed to run after-school programs. The expenses didn't match the income small gaps that grew into gaping holes once you followed them across months. I flagged the entries, built a timeline, traced the payments, and there it was, a consulting fee routed into a personal account always just after a donation came in. My boss leaned over my desk. Good catch. Someone's been skimming. I nodded, my throat dry. The numbers looked too familiar. Money meant for kids rerouted into a black hole. A story I already knew, just with different names. That night walking home, I kept seeing those entries scrolling across my eyelids. I thought about every Venmo transfer I'd sent Amanda labeled groceries, or school, or camp, and wondered how many had been diverted into Ethan's pockets for steak dinners and lottery tickets. The next weekend, I tried again with my parents. I drove out to the house, the one I had once loved for its smell of cinnamon and laundry soap. Dad sat in his recliner remote, balanced on his stomach. Mom folded laundry with stiff hands. I just need to know, I said carefully when Amanda called me a loser. Why didn't either of you say something? Mom smoothed a shirt, avoiding my eyes. You know how your sister gets. Dad cleared his throat, eyes glued to the game. We don't pick sides. You did, I said softly. You just didn't say it out loud. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. It felt like standing in a room where the oxygen had been sucked out. I left the folded laundry on the couch and walked out without goodbye. By the time I got home, Amanda had already posted another photo, the kids at dinner plates piled high. Her caption read, "Blessed that real family shows up. Real family." The words stung sharper than any knife. I scrolled through the comments, friends chiming in with heart emojis, acquaintances saying what a great mom she was. I set my phone down and pressed both hands over my face. I almost texted her, almost demanded she take it down. Instead, I shoved the phone under a stack of unopened mail. The days blurred. I went to work, came home cooked for one. The quiet was both balm and torment. No calls, no knocks. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the radiator, the thud of my heartbeat when I let myself think too long. Then, another message landed sharp as broken glass in my inbox. An email, this time, subject line, "You don't get it." Amanda's words filled the screen. "You think this is about money, Chloe, but it's not. It's about loyalty. Family shows up, family sacrifices. You used to understand that. Now you're just selfish." I read it 3 times each pass, carving a deeper groove into my chest. Selfish. The word I'd been running from all my life. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then dropped. I typed one sentence: "I'm not selfish." I'm finally awake. I didn't hit send. I closed the laptop and went to bed, the unsent words burning behind my eyes. The following Tuesday, my phone buzzed with another unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, then remembered the attorney's voice calm and deliberate. I answered. "Miss Harper, Daniel Ross said, I think it's time you saw the documents in person." I hesitated, staring at the dark screen of my TV. Documents. "There's a pattern," he said simply, "one that involves your sister's household." I closed my eyes. The hum in my walls grew louder. "Tomorrow morning," I said. "Text me the address." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet. My reflection stared back at me from the black TV screen, pale and steady. For the first time, I felt a shift, not guilt, not fear, but something harder. A readiness. The storm was coming, and for once, I wasn't the one running from it. Daniel Ross's office sat on the 12th floor of a building made of glass and stone, the kind of place where the silence of the lobby was thick enough to muffle your own footsteps. I almost turned back twice on the elevator ride up. By the time the doors slid open, my palms were damp, my heart loud enough to echo in my ears. The receptionist waved me in. "He's expecting you." Daniel was tall, his suit understated, his eyes unreadable. He gestured to a chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming." "I almost didn't," I admitted, lowering myself into the leather seat. He slid a folder across the desk. "Your sister hired me. She had concerns." I blinked. "Amanda." The word sounded strange in my mouth. Daniel nodded once. "She discovered certain financial irregularities involving her husband, specifically funds you transferred over the years." My hands shook as I opened the folder. Page after page stared back at me, bank statements, screenshots, receipts. Each line item matched a memory in my head, a Venmo note labeled "school fees," a check for camp money wired for rent, all of it rerouted into a separate account Ethan had kept hidden. I traced one line with my fingertip. A $2,000 transfer from me. The next line, a charge at a steakhouse downtown. My stomach churned. While I was paying for their kids' summer camp, Daniel's tone stayed even. Mr. Miller was frequenting restaurants, hotels, online trading platforms, purchases that bear no connection to family needs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Years of guilt collapsed into something sharper, cleaner. Rage. I leaned back, forcing my voice steady. "So, all those times Amanda said they were desperate he was pocketing part of it." "It appears so," Daniel said carefully. "Your sister found a statement in his desk. That's how this came to light." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "She humiliated me at Christmas for not giving enough when all along." I snapped the folder shut. "She didn't even know." Daniel studied me. "She thought you deserved the truth, that you should protect yourself moving forward." I stared at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Amanda protecting me. The same woman who spat "loser" in my face. When I finally walked out, the Boston air hit me hard, cold, and sharp enough to sting my lungs. But I barely felt it. My mind buzzed with every lie, every manipulation. The weight I'd been carrying wasn't just obligation, it was theft. That night, Ethan called. His name lit my phone like a flare. Against better judgment, I answered. "You've been talking to Amanda." His voice was raw, angry. "Feeding her lies." I almost laughed. You think I'm the liar here, she's exaggerating, blowing everything out of proportion. Nothing. My voice rose, then steadied into something colder. You hid money from your own wife. You blew it while I covered your bills. You think that's nothing. A pause, then his sneer bled through the line. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. No, I cut in. I understand perfectly. You just don't like that the free ride's over. His breath hissed like steam before he hung up. My hands shook as I set the phone down, but for the first time in years, the shaking wasn't from guilt. It was from the clarity of finally knowing the truth. 2 days later, Amanda called. Her voice was tighter than I'd ever heard it. "Did Tom call you, yeah?" I said. She sighed a sound that carried more defeat than venom. I confronted him. He admitted some of it, tried to make it sound like no big deal. "It's thousands of dollars, Amanda." "I know," her voice cracked. "I've been making excuses for him for years. But after Christmas, after how he treated you—" She trailed off, then steadied herself. "The kids deserve better than this." I didn't know what to say. Half of me wanted to remind her she'd stood silent while I was called a loser. The other half wanted to reach across the line and shield her from the collapse. "What are you going to do?" I asked finally. "I'm talking to Daniel about my options," she admitted. "Separation may be more. I don't know yet." I exhaled slowly. "Whatever you decide, I've got your back. But I can't go back to the way things were. I'm not your safety net. I'm not asking you to be," she whispered, and for once, I believed her. When the call ended, I sat in the stillness of my apartment. Outside, snow drifted against the window, soft and relentless. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like a line drawn in ice, bright and unbroken. What I didn't realize then was that Ethan wasn't done, not by a long shot. I didn't plan the confrontation. Confrontations rarely are. They erupt when the silence can't contain the weight anymore. It was a Thursday evening in late January when my phone buzzed again. Amanda's name lit up the screen. For a second, I almost let it die to voicemail, but instinct told me not to. Her voice was clipped frayed. "We need to meet, just us." Half an hour later, we sat in a booth at a half-empty coffee shop. The air smelled like scorched beans and wet coats. Amanda looked older than I'd ever seen her hair pulled back, face-bare hands locked around a chipped mug. "I told him I want space," she blurted. "He didn't take it well." I studied her. "I'm not surprised." She lowered her voice. I found more statements. "Thousands," he siphoned. "Some of it, Chloe, I think he was hiding entire weekends from me." The words should have satisfied me. Instead, they hollowed something in my chest. "And after all that," I said evenly, "you called me a loser at Christmas." Her eyes fell. "I know. I was wrong. You stood there while Mom looked away, while Dad rattled pans to drown me out. You shut me out with them." Her throat bobbed. "I can't undo that, but I can end this with him. And I need your help." The old reflex to fix to provide rose-like bile. I forced it down. "What do you need?" Her voice cracked. "A deposit. First month's rent. I've found a place. If I don't move now, I never will." I closed my eyes. 1,000 memories of checks signed in silence flickered by. But this time felt different. This wasn't patching holes in a sinking ship. This was cutting it loose. "Send me the details," I said. The relief in her face nearly undid me. 2 days later, she texted, "We're leaving today." When I called, her voice shook. "He's out of town. Movers are here. The kids think it's an adventure." I could hear boxes scraping floors, laughter, the squeak of packing tape pulled hard. "Where are you going?" "A rental 2 towns over. He won't know until I'm ready. What do you need from me?" A pause. "You've already say no more." I cut in. "It's handled." By the time we hung up, I'd wired the money. For once, the transfer didn't feel like surrender. It felt like a blade severing the rope that bound me. That night, Ethan came home to an empty house. I knew the exact moment because my phone erupted his name, flashing like a warning. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "You did this," he snarled. "You turned her against me. You ruined my life." I let him rant, voice rising, spitting curses. When he finally stopped to breathe, I spoke low, steady. Maybe if you'd spent less time gambling with my money and her trust, she wouldn't have had to leave. Silence, then a scream of fury before he hung up. I set the phone down on the counter. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't pound. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one drowning in guilt. 2 days later, Amanda invited me to the new place. It was small, a narrow rental on a quiet street. The porch sagged a little, but potted plants lined the steps like a declaration of hope. Inside smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh paint. The kids sprawled on the floor with crayons, arguing over colors in that harmless, ordinary way. "You look lighter," I told her. She smiled, small, but real. "I feel lighter." We sat at the kitchen table with chipped mugs between us. For once, the talk wasn't about bills or bailouts. It was about school projects, the bookstore where she'd picked up shifts, the little victories of standing on her own feet. At one point, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry for Christmas. For all of it." I met her eyes. "You can't take it back." "No," she admitted. "But I can make sure the next Christmas looks different." I held her gaze a long moment, then nodded. For now, that was enough. But Ethan wasn't done. That weekend, the pounding started on my door. Not a knock, a battering ram. I opened it to find him standing there, cheeks red, coat unzipped, eyes wild. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You think you broke us? She'll crawl back. She always does." I crossed my arms. "Not this time." He laughed, harsh and humorless. "You've poisoned her. You've always been jealous." My voice cut clean. "Jealous I was the one paying for the roof over your head while you were hiding steak dinners in hotel rooms." His jaw clenched. "You don't understand pressure." I stepped closer, my tone like ice. "I understand perfectly. You just don't like that the free ride is over." For a flicker, fear crossed his face. Then he shoved past me, storming into my apartment. He scanned the room like he could find Amanda hidden behind my walls. "She's not here," I said. "She doesn't need you anymore." His eyes narrowed. "She needs me. She's nothing without me." That's when I smiled, a cold, sharp thing that startled even me. "Funny." I thought that about myself once. Turns out I was wrong. He froze, the silence heavy. For the first time, Ethan had no script. Finally, he turned, muttering curses, and slammed the door behind him hard enough to rattle the frames on my wall. I stood there, the echo still shaking the air, and realized something final had shifted. The balance of power was mine now. Later that night, Amanda texted a picture the kids cross-legged on the floor, pizza boxes, open a tiny Christmas tree, glowing, even though it was February. Her caption read, "We're okay." I stared at it a long time, that little island of peace in the wreckage. For years, I'd thought survival meant giving until I was empty. But the real survival, the real revenge, was showing them that I didn't need to. And in the silence that followed, I felt something new settle into my chest. Not guilt. Not fear, relief. Cold, clean, unshakable. The kind of relief that comes when you finally know the storm isn't chasing you anymore. You are the storm. The days after Ethan stormed my apartment felt unnaturally quiet, the kind of calm that hums before thunder. He had thrown every insult he could find at me, and still his voice haunted the air like smoke. But instead of choking me, it reminded me that I had something he didn't proof. The folder Daniel gave me sat in the drawer of my desk. Every so often, I pulled it out just to feel its weight. Bank statements, receipts, screenshots, years of transactions he thought no one would ever trace, evidence strong enough to scorch his reputation if I chose to open the fire. I didn't rush. Revenge is wasted when it's loud too soon. No revenge is a seed. It needs silence to grow. Amanda called more often now, sometimes just to talk about the kids' homework, sometimes to sit in silence with me on the phone. Once her voice dropped almost a whisper. He keeps calling, begging, threatening. I don't know what he'll do when he realizes I'm not coming back. I pressed the folder shut. "Then you'd better make sure you're ready when he tries." She paused. "You mean, I'm not letting him rewrite the story this time." The truth was, part of me wanted him to try. wanted him to step 1 inch too far so I could show him the pages he'd never meant anyone to see. At work, I caught myself glancing at spreadsheets differently. Every number looked like a clue. Every discrepancy a weapon waiting for the right moment. Numbers don't lie, people do. And Ethan had woven lies so long he believed them. He had forgotten that paper keeps score. One evening, Amanda and I met at the rental house. The kids were in bed, the little Christmas tree still glowing faintly in the corner. She handed me a cup of tea with both hands, the steam curling between us. "You really think he'll come after me?" she asked. I nodded. Men like him don't let go. They push until someone pushes harder. Her shoulders sagged. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to," I said. "Not alone." Her eyes searched mine. "So, what are you planning?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached across the table and tapped the folder I'd brought with me, thick and worn at the corners. She stared at it as if it might explode. "You're not... You wouldn't..." "Not yet," I said softly. "But if he wants a war, he'll have one." We sat in silence, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator and the soft crackle of the tree lights. For once, Amanda didn't argue. She just nodded like she finally understood. A week later, he tried. The call came just past midnight. His voice was hoarse frantic. "You've turned her against me. You've poisoned everything. But it's not over. She'll come crawling back. You'll see." I let him rant. Then calmly, "You're right about one thing. It's not over. Not yet." I hung up before he could reply. My reflection in the dark window looked back at me, steady, unflinching. The folder waited in the drawer. The copies I had made sat on a flash drive tucked inside a safe deposit box he didn't know existed. For the first time, the power wasn't his. It was mine. I didn't need to swing yet. I just needed him to know I could. Weeks passed. Amanda found steadier footing a routine with the kids' shifts at the bookstore, the small thrill of paying bills with her own name on the check. Each time she called, her voice held a little more steel. Ethan, meanwhile, grew louder. Mutual friends whispered that he was telling anyone who would listen that I had destroyed his marriage, that Amanda was brainwashed, that the kids were suffering. I didn't bother defending myself. Let him talk. Words are wind. Paper is iron. One evening, I sat on my couch, lights-off folder spread across the coffee table. I traced the lines of each statement, each transfer, each lie made tangible. A cold smile curved at my lips. They thought calling me a loser would end me, that I'd crawl back wallet open begging to be useful again, but all they'd done was hand me the weapon I needed. The next morning, I mailed a single envelope. Not to him, not to Amanda, to someone else entirely. Someone who could make sure his name wasn't just whispered in failure, it was written there permanent. I don't know when he'll find out. Maybe tomorrow, maybe weeks from now. But I already know what his voice will sound like when it does rage desperation, the sound of a man realizing his safety net has not only been cut, but set on fire. And when that day comes, I won't raise my voice. I won't beg him to stop. I'll just remind him of the night he called me nothing. And I'll smile the way only someone who's finally free can smile. They thought they had buried me under shame. They thought they had erased me from Christmas, from family, from love itself. But what they didn't know was that I don't need their door. I can build my own, and this time, it won't open for them. If you've ever been left standing outside your own family's door, wondering if you'd ever be let back in, then you know what it feels like to be me. For years, I thought silence was safety, that giving more would eventually earn me love. All it earned me was scars and empty bank statements. But now, I see it differently. Being cast out wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something stronger, something sharper. The people who once called me a burden are about to learn what it feels like to carry the weight of their own choices. And if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, know this, you are not alone. We are thousands, maybe millions, watching from our own screens, holding our own stories close. So hit subscribe, stay with me. Because this story isn't over, not by a long shot, and you don't want to miss what comes next.